Okay, hi everybody. I'm gonna do a string changing little tutorial. Uh, let's start again. Hi everyone. My name is Brian, and I am doing a string changing walkthrough with a Floyd Rose setup kind of guitar. I'll just go over kind of what I do and yeah, just walk through with how to change strings. So first things first, if it's got a locking system here, also you're gonna notice I'm wearing a, a headlamp just so that you can see what I'm looking at. So if it's got locking system here, you're gonna need to unlock it. I've installed a Allen wrench holder behind the neck of my guitar. Some guitars come with this, some don't. So I just went ahead and installed this because I hate finding these Allen wrenches, and so I always just keep it right there. So first things first, you're gonna want to undo this. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. And you'll notice that they're not on very tight. They're on snug, but not super tight. I usually try to keep them all in order. So you'll notice that I'm gonna start putting them in the order of which they're laid out on the guitar. Hopefully as I'm changing the strings I don't bump them, but yeah, okay, so that's first things first. Then from there I loosen the strings a little bit. I know some guys that go straight into just clipping the strings, but I like to at least loosen the strings before I do that, just so that there's less snap. So this is a winding tool, just makes the twisting job easier. If you don't have one of these, it's fine, just gotta do it by hand. So I just loosen it so the strings are not pulled taut, so they're sitting kind of loose. I know there's some guys that will change each string one by one, but my general rule is when a string breaks, then I just go ahead and change all the strings. For this particular guitar, none of the strings have broken, at least not that I can remember. And yeah, I've been doing some recording, so right now I want to have some fresh strings. These are getting kind of corroded. So now that the strings are loosened, I'll go ahead and snap them. I'll cut them. If you don't have a wire clipper, you can just kind of do the old-fashioned trick, which is you can just sit there and then wiggle the string until it finally snaps. I used to do that before I had wire clippers, but if you have wire clippers, it makes the job a whole lot easier. So this is the reason why I loosen the strings, so that it's not really violent when you clip them, so that they don't fly away. So I just cut them somewhere in the middle, doesn't really matter. For these Floyd Roses, you're gonna have usually a second locking system down here at the bridge. And so the same Allen wrench from behind the neck of the guitar will also loosen these Allen screws. I don't know what you call them. So anyway, loosening these as well. Now these ones are usually slammed pretty tight. But yeah, just lefty loosey. Don't need to go too crazy. Just enough so that the strings can get removed. So yeah, it's a delicate process. Kind of relaxing. I usually listen to music. Have conversations with my wife if she's around. Don't really have to pay too much attention. Okay, so string removal. First step of changing strings. Remove the strings. Everybody kind of has their own way of doing it, their own little rituals, their own little routines. I'm just showing you the way that I do mine. I'll typically lay a small blanket on the top of a table, and then just grab a towel and roll it up. I know there's guys that have specific blocks, and they might be kind of all particular about how much weight they have on the neck and all that stuff, but I don't care enough about that. Okay, so right here you're gonna notice that I'm having a hard time pulling this out. You may have also noticed that the ball end of the string is up here at the head. Normally the ball end would be down here, but I'll reveal to you later on why I do this. But for these double locking Floyd Rose kind of systems, it doesn't really matter what side you have the ball end on, because you usually clip it. So I'm having a hard time. This is just a plier. I'm going to see if I can pull it out. I don't recommend doing this, honestly, but I'm just curious if it can come through. Okay, it's real stubborn. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip it closer. So in fact, since I'm already doing that, I'm just going to clip all the strings real close to the peg here. So less stuff to deal with. You're going to be throwing all this stuff away anyway. So I have my little discard pile right here, just so that I don't get confused as I'm changing the strings. There we go, comes right out. You can also do it by hand, generally speaking, and if you string it like a normal person, which means the ball end would be on this side, you wouldn't be running into this problem. The reason for this is that usually by the ball end point, it's thicker than the actual string, so that's why it was giving me a hard time. But again, you will see why I do this in just a second. Well, later on in the video. Why do I do this? Now, everything that I'm doing, I wish I could say I figured it out for myself, but that's just not true. Everything that I'm doing, I stole the ideas from somebody else. You know, either somebody said, oh, hey, I do this, or I do that, and I was like, hey, you know what, that's a great idea. So one of my little rules, if I have a real big gig coming up, I'll change my strings. If one of the strings breaks, I'll then, at the earliest convenience, just swap out all my strings. I usually carry a set of strings in my guitar case in case a string breaks at a gig. And that right there is the key point why I string the guitar like how I do. In case a string breaks. Now what's pretty interesting about these Floyd Rose guitars is that I've found most of the time the string breaks over at the bridge, so right at the saddle point. And because of which I've realized that if I put the ball end here, I can just loosen the string, pull a little bit extra out, and stick it back in there. And so that's the main reason why I string the guitar from kind of what it's opposite, it's backwards to most people. Okay, anyway, that's just me talking story while I ramble on while I do this. So now all the strings are removed. You don't have to do this, but this is something that, again, I picked up along the way. Hydrate my neck with this fretboard conditioner. There's directions on it. Usually says apply a little bit, whatever the directions say. This is Diodario, but pretty much all major guitar accessory brands have their own spin on it. This is just to clean up the fretboard, give it some moisture. And so I like to do that when all the strings are removed. What I also like to do when all the strings are removed is I like to take a credit card, unused credit card, old credit card, and I like to scrape off all the gunk that piles up in between the frets. So I'll just take a credit card and just kind of slide it forward, not too hard. This is a pretty clean guitar compared to how much abuse most of my guitars are when I change the strings. I kind of changed the strings on this guitar fairly recently, but I've been doing so much recording that the string quality has kind of become compromised, so I decided to just change strings and record a video while I did it, while I'm doing it. Okay, so not much gunk there, but what that does is it kind of forces the gunk into the frets. Now something new that I've really got turned on to was taking like this is like a dental pick, so usually you would be cleaning your teeth with this. I just bought this to basically scrape the corners of the fret. And there's usually a lot of gunk that gets stuck up in there. And you know, you don't have to do this to change your strings. This is just one of those things that I have done now over the years that are just a ritual habit at this point. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's some gunk on that dental pick. And I've found that as I've, you know, come along as a guitar player, this gunk absorbs sound. And what that does overall, you know, philosophically speaking, is it creates your guitar, it makes it so it sustains less. So anything that's not contributing to the sound of the guitar, in essence, is contributing against the sound of the guitar. It's a principle that I picked up after watching a TED Talk with Paul Reed Smith, the creator of those very fine instruments, the Paul Reed Smith instruments. And he kind of explained how, you know, you need to have things that reflect sound in order to create an instrument that sustains really well. So I don't know if you can see, maybe my fat head's blocking the angle, but there's a lot of gunk that kind of comes off in the corners of where the fret meets the neck, meets the fretboard. Now be careful with this. You don't want to be too crazy. You don't want to slice into the fretboard. I'm just gently scraping out all that gunk. Well, this is a good fret to give an example of. Again, I can't really see what my GoPro is doing, but right up in there, there's some gunk. And you see how that just came right out? Yeah. Yep, this is why you wash your hands before you play, folks. You don't want to get that gunk. But if you're like me and you just play without washing your hands, yeah, this is why this is part of my string changing ritual. Yeah, just getting that gunk out. And this is something that easier to do when you don't have any strings on the guitar. So I'll just do it once over. And you know, a little bit goes a long way, and vice versa. A little bit of gunk piled up on each fret goes a long way to contributing to your crappy tone. So this is what I do whenever I change strings, is I just do a quick little maintenance. This is also how I judge how guitar shops clean up your guitar. So, you know, I spend kind of a lot of money, usually once a year if the economy is going good, to get all my good guitars professionally set up. And when they come back, I kind of take note on how much detail. Most importantly, I'm trying to make sure that the guitar is intonated, especially on a guitar like this, a Floyd Rose. Those are just hellacious to intonate, but the point being, this attention to detail, it's tedious. I do not necessarily get pleasure out of doing this, but I do get pleasure out of having a great sounding instrument. And yeah, I'm just monologuing right now. If you like these kinds of videos, feel free to comment and I might make another one. I'm really hoping that the angle is good, because I'm just doing a one-take wonder here. Alright, so all the frets have been degunked. There's one last thing that I do as far as no string maintenance is I'll take some very fine grit steel wool and I'll polish the frets slash clean up the fretboard a little bit. Now, they actually make fretboard like covers so that you don't run the risk of steel wooling your fretboard. Do not use this if you have a like what are those, maple necks. this needs to be unfinished. If you use steel wool on a finished fretboard, it's not a good thing. So this is only for unfinished fretboards. Okay. Before I do anything though with the steel wool, because steel wool is magnetic, your pickups are going to pick up, literally, they're going to magnetize all the steel wool shavings. So I just take some masking tape and I tape off the pickup. I don't really know why I do this, other than I believe that unnecessary pull on the magnets will cause the pickups to die sooner. But I know a lot of people do this, and I don't really know why. If somebody out there knows exactly why we guitar players do this, besides ensuring that there isn't steel wool shavings on our pickups, feel free to enlighten me. I like to learn. But I did notice that doing a once over with the steel wool did kind of pick up some gunk, and I've just become a fan of that ever since. So I tape off the pickups and try to make sure that there's no holes, and then I just very lightly go up and down the neck with the steel wool. And you're gonna notice, probably not on the video, but if you do it yourself, that there's all these little shavings. All the more reason why you want to have a good work area. And yeah, just kind of let my steel wool over the top, just gently. I'm not digging in, I'm just kind of essentially polishing the frets, because again, any gunk absorbs vibration. You don't want your guitar absorbing vibration, you want your guitar reflecting vibration. That'll cause it to sound so much better, and every little bit counts. Any single grain of rice tips the scales, is the saying. Oh, I forgot to hit the timer. I was hoping to hit the timer at the beginning. Let's see. It says I've been doing this video for 17 minutes. So far 17 minutes in. Okay. So steel wooled. And then I kind of do this to make sure any extra steel wool is coming off of it. I don't want any of those little shavings anywhere. And then I remove the tape. I try to use gravity to help me. I remove it downwards. And you're probably still going to find some shavings get stuck on it, but whatever. And then I put that in my throwaway pile over there. Yep, shavings everywhere. Okay, now that that's done, we are ready to install the strings. Okay, so, oh yeah, before we do that, I like to polish up the headstock. Just clean it up. There's always going to be finger grease there and stuff, and just buff it out with a microfiber cloth. Might as well while you can. So again, things need to reflect sound on the guitar. This is exactly why I don't have the truss rod cover. I have a feeling that the cover absorbs sound. Same thing with the tremolo system cover. I just take it off. It's pretty common to remove those things. Okay, now we're ready for the actual string assembly. So what strings am I using? Alright, Elixir Lights. Now I typically don't like coated strings, but I hate changing strings. Look, I moved those things around. The locking nut. Okay, so I usually like to immediately, as soon as I open the package, I put it in the order in which I'm gonna restring. So 10, the thinnest string is generally the last string that I string up. The thickest string is usually the one that I first start off with. So 46 is the thickest. At this point, it's a good idea to wash your hands because you have all those oils and stuff. But I'm just gonna go right in and go. Hopefully my fingers aren't too greasy. All right, so you got your string here, and it's coiled up. Just Get it uncoiled, pretty straightforward. There you go. And now normally, most people, if they're dealing with a Floyd Rose system, they would clip off the ball end and feed the ball into the bottom here. But I am the opposite. I feed the guitar string in through the tuning pegs, like so. Okay? In theory, this works as if it's like a anchor point, or maybe someone might dare say a locking system, but it's not as reliable as a locking tuner. Anyway, this is the trickier part, is you want to make sure that you leave enough string so that it coils just the right amount here. And depending on the guitar, this guitar, each string is progressively longer at the headstock. But more importantly, each string is thicker, it gets thinner, so you're going to need more string to coil around the peg. So with this, I usually like to use the end of the neck of the body, where it sits in the cavity of the Floyd Rose. Sorry, I'm stumbling over all my words. I didn't rehearse this, and I'm just improvising. So for the low E string, I usually just go to the end of the cavity, if I remember correctly. This is the funny thing, is if you forget and you're incorrect, you can kind of adjust as you go, because if this was too much or too little, you can adjust for the next string. But do remember that each string progressively needs to be longer in order to get effective coiling on the other end. So you'll notice that the ball end here pulled completely taut, and I'm just going to clip it at my guesstimation point, which is going to be right there. This at this point is trash. You can throw it away. Then from here, I feed the string into the Floyd Rose bridge, and then I tighten the string. And this one, I really want to make sure it's clamped on snug. There we go. Okay. Next order of business is I start tightening the string. I also pull up on it a little bit. And this is a kind of a thing that I've done just to ensure that it coils properly. So I pull up with these 3 fingers and I push down and make sure that the string is feeding below the hole to ensure that the coils underneath itself. So I'm pulling taut, and again using my little winding tool. And notice how I'm literally touching the body, the neck, with my pointer finger to ensure that that string feeds from the bottom. Okay, once it starts getting kind of tight, you don't necessarily need to do this with locking systems, but I like to put this nut sauce just to, again, I hate changing strings, and anything I can do to help my guitar last saves me time in the long run. So I put some nut sauce there. I also, very importantly, try to squeeze some nut sauce lubricant here at the bridge point. Basically, any point where the string is going to be under friction, you want to put lubricant. This will allow it to stretch better. You know, it'll ultimately cause your guitar strings to last longer. Okay, I'm grabbing a tuner right now. So now I got the tuner. I just use one of these Snark clip-ons. Very convenient tool. And I'll turn it towards, hopefully you can see it. One particular point about this Floyd Rose guitar is that I have it blocked, and I'm using a tremolo. All these screws are tightened down. So for all intents and purposes, this is a Floyd Rose that doesn't function. So you won't be having to deal with too much of the fluctuation. Tuning Floyd Rose guitars are a pain. So anyway, I'm going to tune to make sure that this is an E. This guitar is set up in E standard. Getting up to E. Yep, more or less good enough. You're going to go back and tune it again anyway. So then you move on and do it to the next string. Same thing. But this time, you're going to give yourself a little bit more string on that end. So it looks like my amount was a good amount, so I'm just going to give myself like 1 knuckles width longer on that side of the guitar when I pull the string out. I usually like to make sure that the string, when I feed it in, the peg is pointing straight down the neck, you know, like this rather than something like this or whatever. So I just try to make sure that it's always pointing directly where it needs to go. So the low E string I had cut right at the cavity. Now I'm going to cut it right around there. So just a little bit more. And yeah, this is one of the advantages of the Floyd Rose feeding it the backwards way. Because again, if the string breaks here, you'll have extra string that you can pull your guitar string through, and in a pinch, you can still survive. There's been multiple occasions where string busted, and I was able to improvise in that I could restring real quick before I had to play an important part in a song. Kind of reminds me of those guys reloading their muskets in those, like, you know, Revolutionary War days. I don't know, maybe you got that reference. Okay, so again, same thing, pulling taut and just ensuring that the string is feeding from the bottom. Okay, it's already at A sharp, good enough for me, because we're gonna have to go back and retune it. I had forgotten to put the lubricant, so I'll loosen it up a little bit, just to make sure that I can get it in there. Again, this isn't necessary on a locking system, especially the nut. The bridge is a little bit more important to ensure that you have some lubricant there, because again, this is where the string breaks generally. It's that point of contact. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does break right there. So tuning up the A string, it says B, whatever. Okay, 26. This would be the D string. Same thing. So we're just gonna go 1 knuckle at a time. So again, feeding the string. And not the end of the world if you twist the knob the other way. So you'll be noticing that I'm twisting the knob away from myself. You know, if you strung it to where it was the other way, other guitar players might laugh at you, but at the end of the day, it'll still work. Not the best thing for your instrument though, but it won't break it. So what I mean by that is, if you take a look at these 2 strings, if you spun it the other way, it would be feeding from this side. So as it coiled, it'd be coming from that side rather than this inner side. And if you take a look, the inner side is what's perfect because it lines up almost, you see how it's straight? That's one other reason why you want to make sure that it's feeding the right way. Okay, looks like I already cut it, so that's 2 knuckles, and then I just feed it in. Depending on the Floyd Rose, it's either a big cavity, so this one has a big cavity. I mean, I could keep feeding it for a long time. Of course, when I try to do it, yeah, see how it keeps going? That's because it's designed to pick up the ball end, but the principle is the same. Usually it would just stop right there for most Floyd Roses. So I'm just kind of doing that, just pretending that there's a stop block right up in there. For this particular Floyd Rose, this is the Ibanez endorsed Floyd Rose, so probably a way for them to circumnavigate some sort of cost stuff. Okay, so same thing, real fun stuff. So, you know, if you're jamming on this, changing strings shouldn't take more than a half hour. It kind of reminds me of doing dishes or something. One of those chores, laundry, I don't know, whatever. So yeah, changing strings, total chore. If there's a guitar store near you that is offering to change strings for you for free, you know, they might not do all these special things that I'm doing, but hey, saves you some time. I don't know, you might actually like this kind of thing. Okay, here's something interesting. It almost looks like I'm giving it too much slack on that end. So for the next string, I'm going to do the same exact measurement. It's just because I don't want to coil it too much to where it starts, the spool doesn't have enough to catch the string, if that makes any sense. Again, stumbling over my words. Okay. I'm sure the internet's going to tease me quite a bit for my nervous laugh and all that stuff. But hey, there's a YouTube feature where you can put times 1.5 speed, and I do that quite frequently because people don't talk quite as fast as I can hear / listen. So it saves me time. All right, next string, same thing. So once you get a system, once you get a rhythm, I mean, you'll just be doing your thing. Okay, this string isn't quite how I like it, so I'm just making sure that it is how I like it. And so for all the Floyd Rose guitars that I have that allow you to, if it has a locking system on both sides, this is the way that I like to restring. So I'm going to do 2 knuckles again on this side. Again, it's not an exact science, it's whatever. The only reason why I'm ensuring that it has slack really though is in case one of these strings breaks, and in a pinch, as I mentioned before, I will be able to restring it. Okay, tightened it up. Now if you don't tighten this enough, when you start cranking down on the tuning head, it will come flying out of the bridge, the string will. So again, doing my thing where I'm pulling up with my pinky ring in middle and pushing down with my middle. Don't be too violent with these next couple strings because you don't want to put a crimp in them. So just firm but not violent so that you don't dent the string, because again, if you dent it, that's going to increase the chances of it breaking on you. Okay, it's nearing the end, so now making sure that the string is in the bridge correctly, lubing it up. And again, not so important here at the nut, but I do it anyway. Other guitars, it's extra important at the nut, but for this type of system, it is not important. So this should read as a G, good. Then let's take a look. Yeah, that's about right. So the next one I'll do 3 knuckles down here on this side. Are you still watching? I guess this is like those video games where you can watch somebody play it, play through. Except I'm not entertaining enough for my string changing. Tell you all my kind of crazy stories of how I've been in that band or this band or whatever, but yeah, I'm too busy concentrating on changing strings. Okay, so 3 knuckles, 1, 2, 3. Again, it doesn't need to be exact science. And then I feed it into the bridge just a little bit, and then I tighten down the screw. Again, I make sure this side is tight. And do my string move over here. And wind away. I'm going to try to get as close to the peg as I can to ensure that it's feeding from the bottom. If you didn't have one of these winders, I mean, it's not impossible, but it does take some time. I think in the future I might just do a video where I just do this without talking. That might be a fun one for myself. So I guess that'd be string change, no commentary. That'll be the title of it. So again, just read the directions on the accessories if you decide to use the accessories. Okay, this needs to be a B if we're playing in standard. And it says C, whatever. We're gonna go back and fix that. Okay, final string, E string. So this is a size 10, so usually when guitar players are talking about what size of string they use, they are talking about the thinnest string. They'll say, oh, I use 10s. So for this one, I'll do 1, 2, 3 knuckles as well. And then make sure that it's in the bridge. Let's tighten it down. Once that's tight, I've already done it 5 times now. Now it's times 6. So this one, you got to be extra careful with the thinnest string because you really don't want to be too violent with this. But same deal. Wind, 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 wind. Make sure it feeds correctly. Don't be too violent with it. Just like everything with guitar, you got to pay attention to multiple things. Tuner's in my way. Looks like that little move is gonna cost me. Okay, so because I loosened it, it kind of didn't coil correctly. So now I'm undoing my work. Yep, I blew it. Okay, gotta redo it. Okay. Yep. So by moving it and loosening it, it kind of did its own thing. Yeah, so I gotta start over from scratch basically. Okay, that should be good. Is that good? Oh. Alright, so this is kind of a good little scenario. What happens when it goes wrong? I'll just redo it. Hopefully you didn't botch it to where you gotta replace the entire string, because that is a big pain. Yeah. So I've done this a few times during a couple of my guitar lessons where they show up and either they show up without a string where the string's already broken, or their string breaks mid session. So then I go, okay, time to teach you how to change a string. Thankfully, I haven't had to do it on a Floyd Rose, because that would probably take the entire lesson. But yeah. And final touches. Now we put the tuner back. And again, look at me, I hit those screws again. Okay, so now with a pick, I'm going to try picking all these strings and make sure that they're in tune. So this should be an E. Other way for E. Hello. Okay. That broke over there, and I think that's because I gave it too much. That sucks. Oh.